Okay, we'll call our meeting to order. First item is roll call. Diane?
Mayor Skoog?
Present.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Here.
Councilmember Grossman?
I'm here.
Councilmember Mallory? Here. Councilmember Nye?
Yeah.
Councilmember Whiting?
Here.
And Councilmember Rooney is absent this evening. She must be held up by the fire.
She's in a traffic jam.
Okay, next item, discussion, funding the police operations building expansion and remodel. Larry?
Mayor and Council, this evening, Bob Casillas is trying to be with us, who is the financing firm of Stiefel, and they have handled our bond counsel and selling bonds for years, along with Michael Cafiso with Greenberg Traurig. And it turns out that we have 3 of our resource people that happen to be in a traffic jam on I-17 because of a fire somewhere in the area of Sunset Point. And so our bankruptcy attorney for the second item, he also is in that traffic jam. So we'll go forward. We may see them if the highway is reopened. We may not. But what Bob would be telling you this evening is that his firm is very happy to be doing business with us. We're looking at issuing $3.4 million in bonds to go ahead and proceed with the construction of the addition to the police station. That is a number that is all inclusive of the issuance, including the cost of the issuance. In addition to that, Bill has some development impact fees in the bank, if you will, and we've used some of those for the architectural work that is ongoing. And it's unclear right now that with this bond issuance, what the interest rate is going to be. They've got a range in there on that, but they will be shopping with, I believe he said, Bill, 10 financial institutions that they will be shopping this issuance. It is cheaper for a small loan, if you will, bond, cheaper with a private placement, i.e. a bank, than going out into the bond market when you have a small issuance like this. So, Bill, do you have anything that you want to add to this? The proceeds will be available in August, it would appear, with the schedule that they're looking to follow. There will be a number of, one action that is scheduled next week. Then they will be advertising after that, and then beginning to shop the 3.4 million issuance number. And with that in mind, it would appear that we should be able to go out on the streets and get contractors lined up to bid on this in the middle of August to the 1st of September. We would have the proceeds in hand and would be able to pay contractors. And I know that Bill out there, Bill Osborne, is very excited to get this out on the street, but probably not near as excited as your police chief to go ahead and have some additional space. Yeah, that guy over there, along with renovation of some portions of the existing building. And Bill, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Bob was trying to get up here tonight, but he did also indicate that, as soon as if he can get through the brush fire that's on 17 right now, I guess, that he's going to still try to come up. But if not, he is planning to be here next week. Next week will be a formal action once that action is approved, hopefully approved. Like Larry said, we'll go out for bids. He's trying to hit as many private placement agents as possible. In the past, we've had 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 7, 8, 9. So it depends on what the market is, and that market will dictate the rate. So right now we're looking at 2.5% low up to 3.75. This bond issue then, or it's actually a private placement offering, basically is going to be paid from development impact fees from the Public Safety Fund. So at this point, we're hoping that the entire debt service will be covered by DIFs. So with that, again, hopefully Bob, I'm waiting for a phone call from Bob just to tell me whether or not he's ever going to be able to make it up tonight or not. But with that, we'll try
Bill, you may as well just call him, tell him to turn around and go back home.
Well, right now,
if he can get to an exit.
If he can get, that's the problem. He says each exit going north and south is pretty much blocked.
If I could tell you, I just got a text from Jared Parker saying that he's starting to move.
Yep.
So we'll see.
I don't know that Bob would be able to add anything that he won't be able to add
Right.
next Thursday.
So with that,
Do you have any questions?
if Bob shows up, I guess we can let him say a few things, I guess, just to make him feel important. So with that, we'll answer any questions until maybe Bob gets here, if you have any.
Any questions for Bill? Anyone? Mary?
No, but not in public.
Okay.
Not in public. And then one question I have. Are we looking at a two-story addition?
Yes.
So it's not going to be all horizontal.
It's a two-story addition,
6,000 square feet per level.
roughly, yes.
Any questions, comments, anyone?
And if you would like, Mayor, we can bring in the architect's rendering that they've come up with. If that would be helpful, we could do that next Thursday when there would be an adoption.
Might be helpful. I don't know what Mary, Laura?
In regards to whatever the terminology is, to lock in the interest rate, what point in time can we do that because of how it's fluctuating?
Well, what will happen is next week, one of the action items is actually going to appoint Larry to make that final decision. So once that decision is made, hopefully like next Friday, the Friday after the council action item has been approved, then either Friday or Monday, Bob will start going out and seeking responses. And usually it depends on, there's a lot of things, market and
Yes.
everything that's going on nowadays. So, but it also depends on competition. So if you have a lot of bankers that are really looking to try to invest their money, then the rate may come down. Or, 2.5 I think is a little bit low, and we're hoping for 2.5. But if, Bob thinks that the highest that could possibly go would be 3.25.
Well, and that's what it says in our documents here, and that's still very good.
Right, it's a good, decent rate. What I'm trying to do is keep our annual debt service payment around $300,000 a year. Right now, it's projected around $275, so we have a little bit of a cushion. But again, I'm trying to fund this with all the annual proceeds that we get from the DIF fund for public safety, without utilizing general fund monies at all.
Right.
Would you like to discuss a little bit regarding the private placement option about the savings we're going to get? Help me understand that a little more.
Well, the biggest part of that is that you don't have a public offering. So the savings comes in actually with the attorney fees, going out to various types of bond rating companies. For the most part, it's an unrated bond, but we have these banks coming out and kind of bidding on them. So that's where really the savings is in going out and issuing the debt. So we don't need as many documents. We don't have to produce as many documents as we normally would if we went out into the bond market. This is negotiating directly with a bank, private placement agent.
And is it fair to say that our wonderful increase in our bond rating will be very helpful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then the other thing, in which I don't think it's included in your packet, which Bob will probably show you next week, is there's also what we refer to as a coverage test. What our excise tax revenues are compared to our annual debt service. Typically, you want 2.5 or 2 to 2.5%. We're at 8, 9, 10, 12% over that. So we're we have very strong coverage right now.
Right.
So we had a conference call this morning, and I really believe that the financial institutions will find our coverage very strong and will be fairly willing to kind of bid on this.
Overall, it just feels like it's exactly the right time for us to be doing this.
Sure. No, I think,
I mean,
there's always
obviously the need, but I mean, all these other pieces are all coming
Bob, Bob
together.
would probably tell you that there's always better times and worse times, and with some of the uncertainty in the market right now, it may not be the ideal time, but the rates haven't skyrocketed
Yes,
at this point.
That's why I'm having the
So we're not going
discussion.
to, we won't see 8-9%
Yeah.
interest rates, that's for sure.
Well, thank God.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions, comments? Mike?
Yeah, just wondering in general, what makes this project attractive to potential bidders?
Well, I mean, overall, I think it's just our credibility. We have a strong history. We have a strong bond rating. Our debt service coverage is excellent. And if we had that report, I think in 1 year it's like 23 times. Our debt service payment is 23 times below our coverage, so our revenue. So we're just very strong. There's a lot of things that can be thrown into this that Bob would probably be able to explain a lot better than I can, but overall we're just very strong, stable municipality.
And therein lies the reason for the bond upgrade that we got, and we're still shooting for the AAA, but that's a goal as well.
Anything else?
These expenditures wouldn't alter that in any way, would they? Our ability to have the triple?
I don't know.
It's hard to say, but I don't think it would, because it's not a large bond issue.
That's what I
And we're
was
not
hoping.
running up against our coverage test. If we were borderline on our coverage test, I think that would be a little bit of a problem. But I think as long as we can continue to show that we're adding to our fund balances, these small bond issues shouldn't, in my opinion, have a major impact on it. But with bond rating companies, it's hard to tell what's.
Well, we're going to do it anyway, but I'd like to think it won't affect it.
I agree.
Well, and it's important to say this is one of 4 that we're looking at here in the next month. This being the first.
Good. Mary?
And, we've done really well in the past few years paying down a lot of our debt.
How about the last
So-
10?
Yeah, several. Yeah, so we've been very good about getting those things taken care of.
Yeah, it's been a while since we actually went out and issued new debt instead of just refinancing our existing debt.
Right.
Other questions, comments? Anything else, Bill?
Nope. No, Mayor.
Oh, we'll have to wait for
Bill,
Bob, I guess.
you may want to call Bob.
We'll see you next week for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Tell him
Bill.
he better be here.
Yeah, call him up. Tell him.
Any more discussion, Larry?
Nope.
If there's no further discussion, we'll move on to number 4, discussion, Event Center bankruptcy. Who's doing that?
Okay, Mayor and Council, as you are well aware, back in 2005, there was an agreement made between the Event Center CFD and its partnership, which was Global Entertainment and Fane Signature Group, and we entered into into a development agreement, going ahead and dedicating certain revenue streams, if needed, to go ahead and make the event center a reality. As you are aware, an event center was built, second largest public building in northern Arizona, only second behind the NAU Dome. This particular building has served the community well and will continue to serve this community going forward for the next 50 years. As you are also well aware, we serve thousands of people a year. You were all involved with the Home and Garden Show, where they believe there were 17 to 20,000 people showed up. And then you take a look at the photograph, I believe it was 2 days ago, of the Bradshaw Mountain High School graduation that is held in that building. that building is certainly part of the identity of the town of Prescott Valley. It has become that. It is also one of the anchors in our downtown. Okay, the long and short of it, as you are well aware, Global Entertainment filed bankruptcy 3-4 years ago. That left one of the two partners that ran and operated the building. The weight of that fell on Fain Signature Group to go ahead and continue operating the building. And they did so valiantly for a couple of years until they ran out of money to go ahead and operate the arena, and so they filed bankruptcy. It was at that point in time that staff worked very hard to make it abundantly clear that closing that building, finding plywood, shuttering the windows, and having that building go dark was not acceptable, nor was it in the best interest of the town of Prescott Valley. So we have worked very hard for the last 2 years to go ahead and work with the debtor and work with attorneys to find a way to make sure that the arena continued to serve this community in the fashion it was meant to serve it. And so we've taken a number of steps to accomplish that. And we are beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel with the goal that the bankruptcy judge would end up approving a plan that includes our participation. And our participation has two conditions in our view, in staff view. One is the building is opened and run appropriately and professionally, number one. Number two, that we save the community a lot of money. We believe that the plan that has been worked on for better than a couple of years, and the lion's share of that has been Stephen and Ivan and Jared Parker, our bankruptcy attorney. We believe that there is a plan out there now. If the judge or the bankruptcy trustee approves this plan, which mandates in that plan that we are a participant, that we have the potential of saving this community upwards or in the ballpark of $20 million over the term of these bonds. We believe keeping the building open is a worthy venture. We further believe saving this community $20 million is very important. So with that in mind, Ivan is going to walk you through some of the details and history of what's been going on for the last couple of years.
I see the anticipation on your faces as you see all the documents that you had to wade through in order to come tonight. What you have, of course, is a 4-page request for council action, which, of course, isn't a request for action. It's simply a discussion of what we're going to talk about tonight. And then related to that is a document that's called an analysis of valuation, or valuation analysis. And that ended up being, probably 60 pages of material. It all basically started when Allstate got tired of holding the bonds and sold their share of the bonds, which was $28 million out of the $35 million that had been issued, for approximately $12 million. And they sold their bonds to an investment group out of California called Lapis. And Lapis, in making that transaction, felt that they'd done a good job for their investors. They felt that from that time forward, the town could continue making its payments that it makes under the development agreement that was entered into back in 2005, where we make semi-annual payments from the designated areas here in Prescott Valley, whatever transaction privilege taxes are collected. And until 2031, they would make good money because the town had always made its payments. And even if the facility closed or didn't function the way that the bondholders had hoped, as long as the town kept making its payments, they would make money because of the fact that they had purchased those bonds so cheaply. But they came to us and said, we'd like to make a little more money. And the way we'd like to make money is to propose to you as a town that you issue tax-exempt bonds. Now, in order to do that, of course, you're going to have to change the position that you had back in 2005, where you said you would not own the facility. You would simply be a participant in the process. And that has been the discussion now that's been going on for about a year. And that's been going on with the debtor, which is the Prescott Valley Entertainment Center, LLC, the entity that we leased the facility to and that borrowed the $35 million back in 2005. So they're the debtor in the bankruptcy. And then they've been talking with the town, with the CFD, which of course is the same group of council and staff, and then also the trustee for the bonds and the bondholders. What you see in front of you now is a proposal that has come about for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy plan. Now, if I had Jared here, Jared would be explaining the difference between a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And I think most of us have some kind of an idea of what that difference is. A Chapter 7 is a liquidation. Chapter 7 would basically mean that PVEC would have gone away. It would have closed the doors of the center. We would have owned the center, but an argument might be made under our lease with them that would have then gone into default, and so then the center would have gone back to ownership by PVEC, and there would have been some considerable uncertainty about the future of the center as a result. That would have become part of the bankruptcy estate. And if they had not been able to find someone to buy it, there was even the possibility of the facility actually being parted out, and efforts made to to produce revenue for the Chapter 7 estate by a trustee. When Larry says that was not something that the town felt it could allow, it was therefore trying to make sure that a Chapter 11 plan would work instead, because that was what was filed for by PVEC to start with. But there was always in the back of our minds the possibility that a Chapter 11 could be changed to a Chapter 7 at some time in the future if there was no way for a plan to work. And so that's been the discussion. Is there a plan that would work? Unfortunately, because the facility has not historically produced a surplus. In fact, it's struggled over the last nearly 12 years now, 11 certainly. It's struggled to meet its payments, to meet its costs. And it's required a subsidy from PVEC. In fact, from the other entities that make up PVEC, and those are FAIN entities. So it's required an ongoing subsidy. And so the only way that a Chapter 11 worked was for a number of things to happen, one of which was either the town or the CFD issuing those bonds at a lower rate, being tax-exempt bonds, putting those into the bankruptcy as part of the bankruptcy estate, exchanging those bonds for the other bonds with the bondholders so that now those bondholders would have tax-exempt bonds at a lower amount, but a guaranteed payment. And if they would then vote in favor of the plan, the facility would be permanently transferred to the CFD, which had issued the bonds. And then the town would jump in as a creditor, give up any claims that it had under the bankruptcy, and in fact agree to infuse the bankruptcy with some cash over a 20-year period so that other creditors could receive some money over time and therefore would vote in favor of the plan. And that is what started coming about as an idea. Can that work? Can the town then, through the CFD, start operating the facility through a professional operator? That professional operator then would run the facility, presumably run it differently, run it so that it makes more money, at least covers more of its costs. And then if there is a need for an ongoing subsidy, that would also have to come from the CFD. And you know that the CFD has no money of its own, and so ultimately all of the money would be coming from the town. In order through the intergovernmental agreement that the town has with all of its CFDs to provide the finances that every CFD has. And so the real question that came up was, can the CFD issue tax-exempt bonds? Can they be tax-exempt? Is it getting value for what it will pay, meaning the new bonds that it will issue? And we've worked diligently with Michael Cafiso and his firm to try to arrive at a value to the town and the CFD for the facility, as well as the value to the town of no longer having to make those payments until 2031 under the old development agreement. So both of those concepts had to be explored as to what was the value. Will we do better paying the CFD to issue these bonds, paying the CFD to cover any surplus or any subsidy that is needed, paying into the bankruptcy estate in order for the bankruptcy to work? Are all those payments ultimately still going to be less than what the town would have paid under that development agreement until 2031? And that's what that valuation document explains, that in fact it is a better deal for the town through the CFD. In fact, the CFD is receiving value by getting that facility and allowing that facility to continue to operate for the benefit of the community. So that's why you've got that 60-page document. That's really the crux of what you're looking at tonight. We're grateful for the work that Michael's firm did for us. He has indicated that his firm will issue an opinion that says that the bonds, if issued, would be tax exempt. That makes Lapis happy as one of the main creditors. And they and their trustee have been in contact with us and have said, we think this plan will work. We would vote in favor of this plan. So it's now being brought forward to the council, to the public, so that they can see what the details of the plan would be. In July, on July 12th, well, in fact, I'm ahead of myself, on June 2nd, tomorrow, the debtor, PVEC, will issue a document called a Statement of Disclosure, and it will become a public document. They'll issue it to the court. They'll send it out to all the creditors, and they'll say, what do you think about this? This looks like it would work. What do you think? They'll look at it, and then the court will hold a hearing on July 12th down in Phoenix, the bankruptcy court. The court will look at the disclosure plan and say, we think this is enough detail. You know how Larry hates details. Larry hates it, so it's probably enough detail. You were supposed to laugh when I said that.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm not a stand-up comedian. So on the 12th, the court will review that lengthy document, hold a hearing with the creditors, decide whether it's sufficient, and then we'll again send it out formally for a vote by all of the creditors. At that point in time, the town and the CFD are creditors. We have some claims under the bankruptcy, and of course we're named in the bankruptcy as well. So we will then as well have an opportunity to vote on that plan. The vote will have to be taken sometime by mid-August. Our current thought is that sooner rather than later is a better time to look at the plan and decide whether the town and the CFD board would vote in favor of that plan. And so there's a thought that our next public meeting will be on July 20th. That would be a work study. We'd have a special meeting, and that would be an opportunity for us to do all of the things under the plan that would be required, contingent on that plan ultimately being approved by the other bondholders, meaning the other creditors, ultimately being confirmed by the bankruptcy court. And if all of that happens, The facility would become the CFD's facility probably about September 24th. That's the current idea. That's the current thought. If all of it goes forward, all goes well. So that's what Jared would be explaining to you, and he'd get into more detail about the phone calls he's been on as recently as this afternoon, trying to figure out what the denominations would be, whether Lapis feels good about all of the details of the plan, whether they believe that the other creditors are likely to vote in favor of the plan. If the plan isn't voted in favor of, would the judge feel that the plan is still good enough that he would order it approved anyway and go forward with it? All of those things are still to be decided, but the public document, the statement of disclosure, is planned to be issued tomorrow and issued with the court. So not only will folks see all of the documents we've put together today for everyone to look at in terms of the details of the plan and the nature of the analysis for arriving at the value of the facility, but they'll see all of the disclosure that's being made by the debtor, and that will be a public document for folks to look at. Now, Larry just handed me a note. He wants to remind everyone that one of the key issues, one of the key points, is, and this is where Larry would be focusing most, he is in discussions with a group called Spectra. Spectra right now has an agreement with PVEC. And they are a consultant to try to help them run the facility more professionally. At the same time, we are talking with Spectra about a separate full management agreement. And that would become part of the bankruptcy estate. And the terms of that full management agreement will be such that they will be running the facility in order to maximize the return and help us so that the subsidy that would be required this year and in future years would be manageable, would be at a minimum. And that'll all be part of the bankruptcy estate. And that's important because, as Larry pointed out at the beginning, the whole crux of this was the facility needed certainty and needed to stay open. Not only to stay open, but to run in such a way that it did us proud as a community. And that's been a key function of all of this. I remember saying to Larry when Lapis came to us and said, we'd like to make a little more money. We made a good deal with Allstate. We're glad to have them out of the way. Frankly, we said, yeah, we are too, after 4 years of litigation with those guys. And they said, we feel good about going forward with what we've got now. But we believe that we can make a little more money if you'll go ahead and take it over. And the answer was, are you nuts? We made that decision back in 04 and 05. And we've stayed with that. That's been what we've lived by over the last 4 years of litigation. But as soon as they came and said, look, we think we can show you how this not only saves money long term, but you can run the facility even more to your advantage, that's when it started being looked at. And Larry
Ivan,
can
I think
talk
Mary
to that
has
more.
a question for you.
Go ahead.
Mary has a question.
I got a few, and I don't want to, I'll wait till you're...
No, that's good.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the Chapter 7. Just asking, if they would have decided to do Chapter 7, the town, if I understand correctly, will still be and would still be obligated to pay their part.
That's correct.
Whether that is open or closed, we still are paying them a quarterly amount of money.
And that's a very good question, and that's a key question because, remember, the town is not the entity in 2005 that borrowed the $35 million in bond proceeds the facility was built with. The town simply had its obligation under the development agreement. And it was never intended for the town's payments under the development agreement to fully pay off that $35 million in bonds. The facility was to produce a surplus that was going to pay off those bonds. The town's commitments under the development agreement was only a backstop.
Okay.
And so we did have discussions with, because of the 4 years of litigation, when they were at times talking about, maybe that facility would just go away. We indicated that we would make an argument in that circumstance that we weren't going to make our payments. If that facility went away, we were not making our payments, and they could sue us over that. But what we did do in an effort to settle that litigation was, if its doors closed, we confirmed that the uncertainties that we had raised under the development agreements would no longer be uncertain, and the town would, from that time forward, continue making its payments. And so the town, as you say, would have been obligated until 2031 to make those payments, even if the facility had closed.
Okay, and then when you talk about the fact that we would basically own this, correct?
That's correct.
So what I want to know is, if we are the ones that own it, there won't be anybody else telling us what to do or how to do it, because right now we pay a debt and everybody seems to tell us kind of what to do. Just my perception, because we're not the owners. We have an obligation.
Lawyers are always, you know how to keep a lawyer from being able to communicate. You chop off one of his hands because on the one hand versus the other.
Yeah.
And you're still not laughing. All right.
No.
Well, I'll have to quit. I'll have to quit trying that. But technically, the building is owned today by the CFD. The CFD, you are the CFD board as well as the town council. The CFD owns the facility. As such, it doesn't pay property tax, which was key for the facility to be able to go forward back in 2005. However, PVEC owned what's a reversionary interest. So if the facility had ever closed, if the lease we had with PVEC had ended, that was part of what the deed said. The deed said then, based on this reversionary interest, it will go back to PVEC. It becomes part of the bankruptcy estate. What we're accomplishing through our plan is to remove that reversionary interest so that no longer is a risk. The CFD will always own it, and it'll own it in fee simple. Then, of course, the operation won't be done by PVEC. It'll be done by Spectra or some other company that the CFD enters into a management agreement with. I think Larry would hasten to say that given the nature of this community, where we tend to have contractors and try not to micromanage, that he is going to let this management company do its job and have some flexibility and some freedom to make its decisions in order to, magnify the return. But as you say, it will essentially be owned by the CFD.
So would the CFD or the town be more or less the, what do you want to say, the boss of the management?
Larry wants to answer that.
Okay.
Taking the microphone away from Ivan is a dangerous undertaking. The way that the contract with Spectra reads is they will be financially answering to Bill in terms of purchasing and monthly reporting and projections and the whole 9 yards. That will be the interface on the financial side, and that'll be with our management services department, which is completely unlike what we have today, because we didn't have that level of oversight. As it relates to the operational side of things, we will be having meetings routinely established, whether it's weekly, bi-monthly, whatever it is, to go ahead and understand what they're looking to do to operate. And so, for example, we all know that based on the study that was done for the arena, to go ahead and do well, you need to have 112 event nights, and then the thing's going to cash flow. And we've never hit those numbers under the previous management group. Whether those numbers are achievable, we're going to find out. But the most important thing that Spectra is going to need to do, which hasn't been done, which is identify the market. That has never been done well, because if the market had been truly identified, then you would end up seeing many more activities, number one. Number two, greater cash flow through the building. So to answer your question very directly, yes, we're going to be involved. Okay, but we have hired, or will be if the bankruptcy judge approves the plan, the company called Spectra that manages over 40 buildings similar to this or larger, including the one that the Philadelphia 76ers play ball in. They're professionals. This is what they do for a living. They have turned around an arena that was built by Global Entertainment that's in Colorado, and in 2 years' time, they went from a great deal of red ink to cash flowing on the positive side. And they have stories like that all across the country. They're professionals, and that's what we're looking to have brought to the table.
And the old development agreement will go completely away, and that won't be enforceable anymore.
That's correct.
And then the employees that are over there and all of that, Spectrum is overtaking.
The employees right now, as you are probably aware, work for Fain Signature Group, but it's a subsidiary LLC. Once the judge, the trustee, if she approves the plan, and then we enter into a full-blown agreement with Spectra, then they will become Spectra's employees. That's the way they do it. By the way, the individual from Spectra that is up here now and has been working for the Fain Group, been working here now, I believe, for 2 months. Have met with him on several occasions. He is very responsive to requests for revenue projections and any other things associated with this. He is very excited to fully sink his teeth into this, but he's until he has a full contract, he's somewhat limited in what he's able to do. But he has a great amount of experience, and in fact was stolen away by Spectra from the University of Phoenix, where he's been running that arena.
I think Laura has a question too.
I do. I have some comments and questions. I think it's ironic when the council that was seated here at the time we were touring event centers, I happened to be on the team that went to Loveland, and the then manager asked me what our management plan was. Some of you already know this. And he told me bluntly, "You're going to regret that. You should be utilizing Spectra." So it's pretty interesting for me to be at this end of that statement now. My questions are these. If all of our creditors approve, is the judge obligated to approve it, or can the judge at any point say no?
I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, and that would be a great question for Jared. My understanding is that if all of the creditors of PVEC, remember, they're not our creditors, we in fact are creditors ourselves, but creditors of PVEC, if they all approve the plan, the judge will confirm it. I believe that judges have some ability to look at the plan independently, but again, I'm clearly getting on ground that is shaky for me. But I do believe that for the most part, if all of the creditors had approved the plan, the judge would also approve it.
My life experience is that bankruptcy judges are highly unpredictable. And so that's why I was asking the question. I would just like to say there's some of us here that have our name on a plaque on that building. And that means a lot to me. Some of the unspoken things that we can't build into any bankruptcy or any agreements is that we wouldn't have a hotel without this, most likely. We might just now be trying to get one. We wouldn't have some of the businesses that are around us that really rely on events at that event center. So where I'm going with that is we have a responsibility to our business people here in town to make decisions that everyone can benefit from. So while it's obvious that we can save quite an abundant amount of dollars, should this go well through the bankruptcy courts and all of that, the secondary issue for me is we're also saving business for our local merchants, our various businesses. And we want to be a business-friendly town. We say that to people. So I know we will come into criticism from citizens because that's the nature of things. But this is a much bigger decision than 60 pages full.
And I, if I could, I think that it's really important, aside from making sure that the building is operational and excelling at what it's intended to do. But I really have a rough time if somebody is going to criticize this in spite of the fact that we're going to be able to save this community millions of dollars. That's awfully compelling to me.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Larry, but there's a lot of people don't even know the money we've been putting in. They know we don't own the building. This is going to be a big shock to a lot of citizens, and we have to be prepared for that, and we have to be understanding of it. Do I support this? You better believe it. When I was afraid it was going to be a 7 and not an 11, I was ready to go throw myself against that door because the thought that that building could be sold out piece by piece was beyond anything logical that I could come up and think about. My next question is, I've already did a commercial for Spectra based on what they told me in Levelland because they've been so successful with them. We've been told we have to have 112 events to break even. Or is that to make money? To break even or to make money?
Okay, what I was referencing was the ERA study, which was something that Mayor and Council insisted on before we went down the road any further to assist in having that placed in our downtown district. The ERA study indicated 112 event nights would put us in the black, meaning that all of the operational costs would be covered, and it also would end up having some principal reduction benefits. Now, having said that, I believe that the first year we had the arena open, we were hovering around 95 event nights.
That's
okay, so we fell short. We were close, but they had fallen short. It will be interesting to see with professional management in place what strategy they will end up using.
It is important to remember that 5 years of litigation that we had was based on concern about predicting the future. And that ERA study, of course, had predicted the future, and the bonds had been issued based on that to a large extent, although not officially, but it had been one of the considerations. In the end, the facility only produced a surplus on 2 different occasions. It has not since done that. There were arguments during the litigation that that was because it never could, that the ERA study was flawed, all of those kinds of things. In the end, that litigation was settled. Arguments were made that it was all based on the recession. The truth is, no one knew then, and we still don't. In terms of the savings that Larry's talked about, that is something that is in the document that is in front of you, the analysis that's been done. And that's been done with some help, with outside folks who have helped us, again, try to look into the future, figure out what is the value to the community. But one of the things that is important to remember is that at this stage, 11 to 12 years later, none of the analysis anticipates that facility making money in any scenario. It will always, if at all, break even, and probably not that. But the analysis still anticipates that the benefits outweigh the losses. And so that's something that we do need to emphasize greatly, that we don't want to go back down that path of someone saying, well, you promised or you thought. You know, even with Spectra there is no anticipation that that facility is going to make money.
Does anyone here know the number of the events we've had in the last 12-month period? I know it's more, but I didn't. For a while I was tracking them and adding them up, and then I got encouraged and didn't do that anymore. So July is a big month for us.
July is a big month.
That's our decision. Okay, everybody, cross everything until then. Thank you.
Mary has another question.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
All right.
Back to Laura's remark when, the thought that it might go Chapter 7 and it could be literally pieced out or sold out or however you would say that. So, again, I guess I just need to know more clearly that if we own that, no one could possibly do that to us. I mean,
No.
we have all the say-so on this building. No one can say, well, you know what, we're going to sell off the left side or the right side or whatever. I just need to know that we're in control.
That will no longer be possible, right? Remember that the facility, the way it started, we were simply a backstop. We
Right.
owned it only as an accommodation.
Third bucket.
We were one of the buckets. There you go. And today, if the plan goes forward as proposed, the CFD will own the facility. The town, through its IGA, will make the payments for all of the required payments that relate to the plan that cause that to happen. And the town will issue bonds, but those bonds will be completely unrelated to the facility. We will simply pay those bonds.
Right.
And the creditors will have no control over that building. That will all be separated.
Okay, and then I don't even know, just down the road, who knows where, what if someone came up and some investment or whatever said, 10, 20 years from now, I want to buy the building? Are you the town, because I doubt if I'll be here, but are you the town able to sell that building?
Well,
In
now
the
you're-
same way that we could sell the pool or sell this building or sell the civic center or sell the police station. It's the same thing.
Take a vote.
Okay.
It would
All
take a
right.
public vote, but that would be possible.
No, we're not. We're not selling the police department. No.
Not until we add the building to it, no.
I'm just impressed that you think I'm going to be here in 20 years, Mary, since you're so much younger than I am. So.
No,
Marty, you got
I
a
know.
question?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that if the event center ever went Chapter 7 and closed, the ripple effect would go far beyond the borders of Prescott Valley. It would definitely affect the entire Quad City area. But and just to continue and reiterate basically what Mary and Laura Lee said, At one of the economic development quarterly breakfasts, we had somebody from Spectra give a talk, and he basically went through a resume of what Spectra is involved in, and I was absolutely totally impressed. So I'm anxious and looking forward to them managing the building and bringing in what we need to make it a profitable endeavor. And then finally, I guess, would be basically we're going to become a landlord and employer if everything goes through the way we want.
In this case, we'll simply be a manager. We've been a landlord, now we're going to be a manager. We're going to be we're going to be we're going to hire a manager. Yes, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So an employer in a sense. We're going to hire a manager who's then going to hire employees.
Yeah. Okay.
And it'll be very similar to, as Ivan has said, to the way we outsource any number of things, whether it's janitorial services, whether it's street sweeping, whether it's operations of a water system or a wastewater system. We're contracting out for those services.
Rick, you got a comment?
Just a real quick one. You know, the frightening thing for me is that I think I understand this. And this is the first time in 9 years.
There's therapy for that.
Understood this.
Barry, you got another comment?
Okay, and this is really kind of just a personal thing, I think. You know, I asked about the employees earlier, and I understand that Spectrum will be the managers, and they'll hire and do however they do, and that's all fine. But I've been here 2 years ago when companies change or they sold out. And it's really hard as an employee, especially there's a lot of people over there that have been there since day one. And I would just hope that Spectrum, if they haven't already, I don't know because I'm not got in the mix of all this, but I hope that we can be clear up front with the employees. It gives people a better idea of what's going on. I know we have a lot of things that we have to do here before you can really talk about where we're going. But something, when there's a lot of unknown, and you know what I'm saying, it just creates a lot of uneasiness. I know we have no guarantees. We don't have something that tells us in the future we're going to have, you know, this, or that. But to give just a consideration.
And I think that's a very good point, Mary, and I know that we were helping Fain Signature Group go through a competitive process to select a quality operations company. And this started back in October, I believe it was, and we assisted with them advertising, and we observed their interviewing of two particular companies that submitted proposals to run this. One of the items that was in the request for proposals went ahead and indicated that any operations company had to take all of the existing employees and keep them for 6 months, and then they could let them go if they found out they didn't meet the qualifications that they needed for to be an employee for Spectra. Now, having said that, their manager has been on site for 2 months now. He is evaluating those employees. The employees are also aware that if the bankruptcy trustee approves this, if you approve this proposal going forward, that when that building comes under the CFD's operational control and ownership, that they are going to be hiring more employees than what are there now. And so if an employee has been able to prove him or herself, then they ought to be in good shape, and their paychecks will be coming from Spectra rather than one of the Fain entities.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I should jump in. Poor Larry.
I don't.
Jared would insist that I do this. You know how we lawyers are about details. And One of the things Larry has talked about is a trustee. A trustee is only under a Chapter 7. There won't be a trustee. There will be a plan agent. But the point is, we're going to be looking forward to the creditors approving the plan and then the bankruptcy judge confirming the plan at some point. It's also important to talk about some of the detail about parties. I know that the Fain family was heavily involved in all of the things that went on in 2004, 2005, but they have a number of entities, and they were involved in the development agreements. But they, along with Global, created PVEC, and PVEC is the entity that is actually in bankruptcy. When Global went into bankruptcy, 2-3 years ago, the PVEC entity was reorganized. And while Fain Signature Group was part of PVEC in those old days, it no longer is. And so they would want it clear that there are actually two new Fain entities that are involved, one of which is actually running the facility. So today we try to just make sure we make those distinctions when it comes down to all of the details. And you've got all those documents that talk about all of those details. And we're really grateful for the help that we have received in terms of those details. Jared, you remember Jared helping us through the whole bankruptcy process out there in Stone Ridge. We're grateful for Michael Cafiso and his firm and all the help they gave us in terms of helping these bonds be able to be tax exempt and coming up with an analysis that arrives at a value. We're also grateful for another attorney that is helping us make sure that the real estate transaction, that the facility is coming over free of any liens and those sorts of things. And so we're really grateful for all of the people that are involved, including the folks that have kind of made my life miserable to a certain extent. You know, all the attorneys for the trustee, meaning the trustee of the bonds, the current bonds, and Lapis and their group, and all of those folks who are an integral part of this, an important part of it. But as you're all trying to do this round robin of negotiation over a year, it gets difficult. But we're grateful for all of their involvement and believe that the documents are going to be helpful.
Any questions? Laura, you got another comment?
No.
No, I was looking at this parking agreement. And it's limited to 20 years. Am I reading it right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What happens after 20 years?
It gets renegotiated.
Renegotiated.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mayor, I do have another question. It just occurred to me. I read this really like 1 o'clock this morning, so it isn't all really clear to me. The CFD, which is part of the entertainment center, where part of the taxes always went to this, that stays the same.
The CFD
Taxing entity, which is the entertainment center. District, sorry.
No, the town is the taxing entity.
Okay.
The town is the taxing entity, and the CFD only owned the building. The CFD was just an accommodating entity that owned the building so that it would be tax exempt.
Okay, so help me understand that percentage of the taxes from the entertainment district. What happens with all of that?
The entertainment district is a concept as opposed to the CFD.
Right.
Okay, there you go.
They're separate entities, I know
Right,
that.
yeah.
But now what happens to all of that?
Well, that goes away. That was all part of the development agreement. Under the development agreement, the town was agreeing to pay on a semi-annual basis the amount of TP taxes that had been collected within areas that were described as the entertainment district. Okay? When the CFD was involved, they were not issuing taxes. Now, the development agreements will go away. The town will just collect that money. It'll go into its general fund. The town will then take some of that general fund money under its IGA, will give that to the CFD. The CFD will then pay that towards bonds, but that will have nothing to do with the entertainment district, with any specific area, with the facility itself. It'll simply be a separate bond paid for with out of the general fund.
Yeah, but that's still dollars coming out of the entertainment district.
No, it's no longer limited by the entertainment district. The entertainment district was a specified area where certain
Okay,
businesses
so
paid into it.
when you go to court, all of that goes away.
All that
is
goes
what
away.
you're saying.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
Mike, your comment?
Yeah, I just had a few brief, and that's just my perspective. You know, I think when we talked about this the last year, we presented in a way that we have options, and really, you know, I don't think we do. I think the outcome, one way or another, we have an obligation and responsibility to move forward. And it just depends who has control over that. And I think what we're trying to do is ensure that the CFD or the town of Prescott Valley has control over that. And the reason I say that is, as we've talked about before, is that I feel that the event center is an asset to this community, is part of our community. And we've made an investment through the process we've been talking about all evening that will continue either way, whether it's under Chapter 7 or Chapter 11, and or otherwise if we take it over and sell bonds. And I think my perspective is we want to make sure we keep that investment because it's something that does enrich the community. And I think we all know now how we got here, and it's been an interesting story for sure. And I think now we're trying to create some sort of roadmap as to how we work this out in the future. And I think it's primarily to manage our investment. And so as we see things unfold, I think my feeling is, optimistically or otherwise, that we'll have a good opportunity to manage our investment. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Marty, you got another comment? Rick, you got any comments? Anyone else have any comments?
Mr. Mayor, could I just mention that Stephen is out there in the audience with his mother. And Stephen has been involved in a lot of this as well. We've been spending a lot of our life this last year on these issues. The intense part this year, and indeed for almost 10 years now, if you think about all the different stages we've gone through. But Stephen has been particularly involved with trying to help deal with this building so that I have more time to deal with the event center stuff. And I've certainly just appreciated all of the work that he's done.
And it should not go unrecognized that Ivan has spent 2 years of his life working on this. And I'm beginning to wonder what he's going to do once this comes to a conclusion.
Oh, the Fades always handle that. We have no say in it.
Stephen or Mother got any comments? You're well covered, huh? Okay, are there any other questions, comment? Anything else, Ivan? Larry?
No, Mayor. No.
Any other council got any other comments?
Just a little over an hour.
If there's no further comments, by the way, did you call Bob and tell him to turn around and go back home?
Bill did.
And Jody, she knows. Okay, if there's no other comments, I know we have one more serious item to cover, and it's adjournment. If there's no further questions, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. And next week we'll learn more when Bob will be here and Parker.